Welcome to episode 192 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend. I'm ringing in from San Francisco, California, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshul Sag. Let's get started with my first topic, and I want to talk about AWS. And they've had a big cloud core win with Telefonica Germany. So it's 5G cloud core. And basically, Telefonica Germany is going to move all of its 1 million plus subscribers on 5G to the AWS cloud. They're touting this as a first, and it's a first from the standpoint that this is a brownfield network. And we've talked about AT&T and what they are doing with Ericsson with Open RAN, but this is touted as the first brownfield migration to cloud core. And certainly when you look at Greenfield, and we've talked a lot about Dish in the US, Rakuten in Germany, Reliance in India, this is a big move. It's a big win for AWS. And I don't know what to think about it. It's huge. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I think it's a big deal. I think, this isn't a new network, so
Right.
this takes a lot of convincing. And if this takes a lot of convincing, then there must be a good value proposition for Telefonica to
Hmm.
go in this direction. So I think it's a really big win for AWS. And I think that it's probably not going to be the last one, but it does show that they are continuing to gain momentum with their 5G cloud core.
I agree. I mean, a cloudified core brings a lot of advantages from an agility perspective and just the ability to be able to do things a little more software defined over the network. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all sort of rolls out and what benefits come from it. I mean, certainly there can be some some capex savings there, some opex savings, but it's quite interesting. So we'll keep monitoring this, and if things develop, report back on a future podcast. But let's go to your first topic, and you want to talk about net neutrality. And so there's some new language. We've talked about net neutrality, how that's been reversed from the Trump administration. And you want to sort of talk about how that might affect network slicing, because we've also sort of theorized about that, but we've
Yes.
got more details. We've got more details now, so take it away.
So this is part of a final order. Um, this follows the vote that happened last month that we talked about.
Yep.
Um, and the the FCC's draft rules were out, but now they have a final version that now contains text that says, "We clarify that a bias, which is a broadband internet access service provider's decision to speed up on the basis of internet content applications or services would impair or degrade other content applications or services that are not given the same treatment." So they
Mhm.
actually are moving in the direction of network slicing is a problem for consumers,
Mhm.
and that the the rollout of 5G standalone with network slicing could be affected by that. Um, but the thing is that um, some of those, the reality is like some of the applications for network slicing that are enterprise based won't be a problem. So
Mhm.
it might end up that network slicing becomes an enterprise only application, and doesn't actually reach consumers. But I actually think what might end up happening is some applications might become enterprise solutions, and then the service becomes, entangled um, with the network slice, and then gets offered to consumers. But I feel like that might become a problem with FCC.
Yeah.
Here's the problem: it's a 512-page document,
Wow.
and um, I tried to get Adobe Acrobat to summarize it, but it won't do it because it's over 120 pages.
Yeah.
And I had Copilot summarize it, and the summary is like 2 pages long.
Right.
But basically, it's all about definitions and open internet access and reclassifying in Title II, and really kind of in a way going backwards to the old definition that was a new definition, under a different administration. So
Yeah.
I think there's still going to be a lot of figuring out exactly how this shakes out for ISPs. But right now, it seems like network slicing is dead for consumer applications, but it will very much be alive for enterprise applications, which might have been the killer use case to begin with. Um,
Right.
and I think what will end up happening is maybe there is a network slice for consumer traffic, but it's just to keep consumer traffic separate from all the enterprise traffic. So all consumer traffic gets treated equally, but enterprise traffic actually ends up getting treated differently based on application.
Yeah, from my perspective, the majority of the applications and use cases that are going to take advantage of 5G's improvement in, massive device support, very low latency, and security are in enterprise. And I would argue it's probably 90+%. And I think, things like mobile gaming could stand to benefit. It was interesting because we talked about AT&T's Turbo, and there have been some of its competitors that have come out informally and formally stating that it's just a scheme for AT&T to to extract more revenue and ARPU from its subscribers. So it's been, and we sort of theorized on our last podcast that it was sort of a test the waters here. And the dust hasn't settled on this yet, and I think there are a lot of nuances to it. And at the end of the day, if it's sort of focused on data, like the Turbo offering, sort of boosting the capability of data, that's a lot different than providing prioritization. Let's say in a streaming scenario, you certainly would be anti-competitive to allow sort of like a Netflix as an example to have a better tailored latency profile than say Max or a competing streaming service. So
Sure.
I do think the dust is still settling on this, and it'll be interesting to see how things progress. I mean, certainly the FCC. I mean, they're knowledgeable about networking 101 and they understand it, but I mean, this is a lightning rod,
I
and
was
yeah, and there are a lot of different people that are weighing in on this. Some with solid approaches and solid logic, and others not so solid. But
I was
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's super
I
interesting.
was just gonna say, so I did something interesting. I went through a document and searched for the term network slicing. Guess how many hits I got?
How many?
Zero.
Okay,
So they've gone
interesting.
out of their way to avoid using an industry accepted term that they know is problematic, that they know that they're, you know, everyone's worried about. They don't use the word network slicing. Now, I haven't read through all the different commissioners' statements
Right.
because each commissioner basically has their own statement. I'm sure maybe they will talk about network slicing, but
Sure.
the fact that a 512-page document about the state of the internet, considering we have standalone and 5G, does not actually mention network slicing a single time is very odd to me, and I feel like it's a very
Yeah.
conscious choice.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. Well, I'm sure we're going to be talking about this for quite some time, like we did altimeters and 5G and exclusion zones, man. So this may be our new exclusion zone topic. But let me go to my second topic, and I want to talk about Verizon and their approach to neutral host 5G networks. So there was an announcement this week. Our buddy Mike Dano, he wrote a couple articles. One was around the announcement with Cummins and what Verizon is doing to help build, again, a 5G neutral host network for Cummins. But what's really interesting is Verizon's approach. So, basically, a neutral host is designed to replace a more expensive DAS system, and typically it's in venues. And what it allows a venue owner to do is actually own the infrastructure within the facility. And then they're able to monetize that, allowing mobile network operators to connect to that. So it's all about improving performance, propagation, latency, throughput, and all of that for for video intensive applications. So when you're at a Padres game, when I'm at a UT football game, UT Longhorn football game, typically those networks, they get oversubscribed and they bomb out. And I've had that experience at F1. I've talked about that. I've written about that on Forbes. But what's really interesting about Verizon's approach with Cummins, and they're sort of sticking to it, and again, with Cummins, this is Verizon working with Ericsson, but what's happening is Verizon is owning the infrastructure footprint within Cummins, and so that sort of flies in the face of convention of something being neutral. I mean, typically in these deployments, like at F1 Coda in Austin has contracted with a company called Extenet to install all of the hardware, the small cells, and all of that. And in that scenario, it's sort of a lease arrangement between Circuit of the Americas and Extenet. But like in SoFi Stadium, as an example, beautiful venue. The stadium owner, they own that infrastructure, and so it's not anything that's been subsidized by Verizon or that sort of thing. So it just Verizon's competitors, rightly so, are sort of pointing the finger at Verizon to say, hey, it's not neutral if you're owning that kind of the deployment and management of that infrastructure within the venue. So I mean, what are your thoughts here?
It's interesting because I didn't realize that there was a neutral host component to this Cummins announcement. Because
Yeah.
when I first saw the Cummins announcement, I thought it was just a private 5G network.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw that this was like a neutral host network solution that's like an all new product from Verizon Business.
Yeah.
Um, and I thought it was interesting because um, they use the neutral host network for connecting phones and tablets to public networks of all U.S. carriers. So it's
Yeah.
not just specific to Verizon. And then the private 5G network on licensed spectrum is for business critical applications. So they're not even building a private 5G network on unlicensed. They're actually using licensed spectrum.
Right.
So I think that's part of the reason why Verizon is so heavily involved in this, because they're actually anchoring it to licensed spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think I saw something where, oh yeah, they say as anchor tenant for the carrier agnostic neutral host network, Verizon is technical lead for network implementation, responsible for engineering, equipment, and installation. So to your
Not an
point,
integrator, but Verizon. Yeah.
yeah, they're the one doing everything basically.
Right.
And it sounds like you said they own the equipment as well. So this is like kind of like a private 5G network as a service. Because I'm sure that, Cummins is going to be paying for this for a long time. Uh, there's a lot of recurring revenue, I believe, from what
Right.
I understand. So they're not calling it as a service because I'm sure there's a lot of big upfront costs, but I'm sure Verizon's eating some of those upfront costs in order
Mhm.
to recover them down the road through a monthly or annual payment
Yeah, I
structure.
mean that is likely the scenario for sure. So yeah, it's just interesting. But there's another wrinkle to this. Is sort of as I kind of waded through both of Mike's articles, millimeter wave is in play here as well. So this just isn't CBRS, mid band, and obviously Verizon has a pretty large swath of millimeter wave. I mean that's how they launched their public 5G deployment, was with what they called ultra wideband. And so apparently Cummins has some use cases and applications. I mean, I believe they're an engine company, and I probably should have
Yes,
dug
yeah,
into that. So
industrial engines.
yeah. So if you think about millimeter wave and what that could do, I mean, that's going to provide extreme low latency for tactile control of like robotics and manufacturing automation. So yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of different nuances to this, but it's anything but neutral. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. It'll also be interesting to see as Verizon pushes forward with private 5G network services and with neutral host, if this will be a continued trend, or if they'll pull back and allow integrators, to do this. But I think your hypothesis is spot on. They're likely subsidizing the infrastructure within Cummins versus I think it was SoFi Stadium. I mean, they spent, I don't know how many billions of dollars, was it 3 or 4 billion? They had to dig it into the ground because it was in LAX flight path traffic. And so I don't think, in LA, typically money is not an object, right? So I'm sure they had no problem spending whatever they had to spend on the equipment there. But hey, let's go to your second topic. And hey, Apple launched a brand new iPad, and you want to talk about that. And I've got a little bit of input on that
They
as
actually
well.
launched 4 new iPads.
Yeah, and
Um,
two and new silicon, right? Two versions of new silicon.
yeah, so they launched the iPad Air, and then they launched the iPad Pro.
Hmm.
The new iPad Pro, in some weird way, is actually thinner and lighter than the iPad Air.
Okay.
That doesn't make sense to me either. Um,
No.
the new iPad Pro has a new tandem OLED technology, which has two OLED panels stacked on top of each other to make it brighter. Uh,
Hmm.
on top of that, both the Air and the Pro have 5G. However, the Pro is a $200 upgrade, while the Air is a $150 upgrade, even though
Hmm.
I can almost guarantee they have the same modem.
Yeah.
And there is no millimeter wave on the Pro or the Air, from what I recall. I could double
Yeah.
check on that. But um, the M4 is debuting in the Pro. That is Apple's newest and latest and greatest processor. Usually they debut the M series in the MacBooks.
Yeah.
But I believe that because Qualcomm and others are coming with AI PCs in the next month, Apple
Hmm.
moved up the release of the M4 to launch in the iPad so they could counter message AI PC, which they mentioned at least 3 times during the launch.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I just think that the new iPad is quite nice, but the problem is that iPad OS is still very limited in functionality, and
Hmm.
you really can't multitask. So you're kind of limited to software capabilities there. Also, the none of the new iPads have Wi-Fi 7, which seems kind of odd because it's
Yeah.
really available nowadays.
Yeah.
Broadcom is Apple's supplier for Wi-Fi, and they have a Wi-Fi 7 chipset. So very clearly, Apple decided to make some decisions there. Maybe it would have made it too thick. I don't know. But they
Sure.
also got rid of a camera on the iPad Pro, which supposedly also was due to thickness. So Apple really wanted to launch this as the thinnest, Apple device ever shipped. People erroneously, or Apple erroneously, said it's the thinnest Apple product ever, but
Yeah.
they have a cloth and a credit card that are thinner.
Mhm.
But as a device, it is the thinnest device they've ever shipped. And yeah, I actually wrote up a whole thing that I'll probably publish in the next couple of days. It's currently at 1,887 words, so it's very detailed. And I talk about how Apple desperately wants to beat the AI PC with the new iPad Pro. So half the article is about the iPad Pro, the other half is about how it's trying to compete with the AI PC, and gives you all the details on pricing, which is absurd because if you get the new iPad Pro with the 13-inch model, with the keyboard and 5G, you're looking at 2 grand after tax for a
Wow.
tablet. Also, thanks for reminding me, unless you buy the 1 terabyte version, you cannot get the full 10 core CPU. You only get the 9 core CPU.
Okay.
And if you, that's the M4 version. And if you want to have the new nano coding or nano etching anti-glare, you must purchase the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte version. So you're also looking at 2.5 to 3 grand, depending on how you
Wow.
configure it. So that's tablet in that price category. So I think for a lot of people that's not really a starter, but that's kind of also the OLED is the first OLED Apple's used in any of their products. So um, we'll see, how it goes. Um, this tandem stack is the first time they've used OLED in a tablet or ever used tandem stack. So it's really interesting tech because it lets them do 1,000 nits brightness and 1,600 nits peak brightness.
So I'm going to lean into your swim lane a little bit here. I mean, you're the expert on devices, and I'm the infrastructure guy. But and I don't mean to be a hater on Apple, but certainly I've sort of followed their very various category sales, and for tablet for Apple, it's down. And so I kind of view this as, Apple's way of trying to put some reinvigoration back into sales. I mean, that high end, piece of silicon that they've launched on the Pro. I mean, it's snappy. I mean, it's super fast. But I will say one thing. So, of course, they had to talk about AI, right? And you've talked about that already today, about how, this is Apple's way to sort of get into the, kind of the AI device game. It was sort of light for me. I mean, they showed some things with images and that sort of thing. And I don't know. I mean, what's your take on that? I thought the AI positioning was kind of weak. I mean, did I just miss
No,
something?
it is super weak, and I think it's
Okay,
because they can't really talk about much on AI until they talk. I feel like they're saving it for WWDC.
sure.
Um, but yeah, I think if you look at like what they're trying to do, they're a hardware company, so AI they're kind of struggling with.
Right.
It's quite clear that they're behind, and I think the M4 was a way for them to try and prove that they have the NPU tops. So they're claiming 38 NPU tops,
Hmm.
which they said is faster than any PC or AI PC that's out today, which is
Yeah.
technically accurate, except for
Yeah.
the fact that the Snapdragon's coming in the next month will have
Hmm.
45 tops. So
Okay.
they will be bested very soon, and they know this, but they clearly were kind of trying to focus on making it as
Yeah.
competitive to the PC as possible without actually acknowledging the future. And the thing is, Apple's used AI for a long time, and they like to talk about that. They said they've been doing it for many generations. They also, have had OLED technology in the iPhone, but
Yeah.
they've never had it in iPad. So
Right.
I think they're trying to show that they already have some experience deploying AI on the mobile side,
Hmm.
and now they're going to be doing a lot more AI on the tablet. And it was mostly first party apps, so I feel like they still have to work out on how to get developers to really leverage AI capabilities with this 38 tops, and how that looks, and how these models work. And there's rumor that recently came out that they're going to do some kind of split render or split AI processing hybrid AI where they have their own servers running Apple processors that will help process the more computationally challenging workloads and then do as much as they can on device. So that's a
Yeah.
whole other topic that we'll probably talk down the road.
Yeah, I'm sure they're saving some of that AI news for, to your point, the Worldwide Developers Conference. But interesting stuff, man. Well, hey, I'm going to go to my third and final topic, and I'm going to make this one quick. But we've talked about Tesla on a prior podcast and their desire to deploy a private 5G network within all of their manufacturing facilities. And recently, the company dropped a 78-second video that talks about private 5G, but is it just for show? I mean, that was my first thought. So as I looked at it, there's nothing new there. And it's almost like a bumper sticker or an advertisement that kind of states, look at Tesla, we're embracing Industry 4.0. Hey, 5G is going to be great for manufacturing automation. I mean, our viewers and listeners know that because we talk about that use case all of the time. So, I'm wondering, I mean, does this coincide with the fact that there's been a lot of negative press, coming out of Tesla lately? They had a big win in China recently with self-driving, and I don't know what level, of autonomy that was, but that was a big hurdle. The stock bounced up to close to $200 a share, and then there's just been a spate of announcements with layoffs and starting with I think the supercharging
And
team,
marketing
and
team.
it just continues to go. Yeah, and the marketing team, and it just kind of continues on and on and on and on. So, I mean, from my perspective, the timing of this video drop was quite interesting, and we will definitely include this when we post the podcast, so our viewers and listeners can take a peek at it. But what do you think? You think this is just for show?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because they have a network team. So they
Yeah,
actually have people who are dedicated to deploying the network, the 5G network in Giga Berlin.
yeah.
Um, it does feel very much like a highlight reel. Lots of
Yeah,
bump.
thanks for mentioning that because this was in Germany. And by the way, Germany is very technology savvy, right? I mean, they're one of the leading regions in the world. And when you look at the automobile manufacturing complex in Germany, when you look at Mercedes and BMW and others, I mean, they're already deploying private cellular networks in a lot of those facilities. So
Yeah,
didn't want to interrupt you.
I
Sorry.
think they're a bit of a follower here if you consider the
Okay.
German market, right?
Yeah.
Um, Maybe they're an innovator in the US, but in Germany it seems like BMW and Mercedes have already done this.
Yeah.
So I think it's them showing that they're, moving forward and optimizing their deployment of their factory. But
Mhm.
it's a lot of B-roll footage. And what's funny is they're one of the applications that they're using is just to keep the cars connected to the internet so they can keep them updated before they
For
go.
OTA. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's like the most low hanging fruit possible. But like I
Right.
agree, it's a good application.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to see a lot more inside the factory too. But it's a net
Yeah.
positive, and I don't really think it should really change Tesla's stock price at all. But
No.
yeah, I think it's a net positive, and I think the auto industry is moving forward fast, and we'll see if other car makers follow suit.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's go hit your third and final. And I mean, this when I saw this was kind of an aha moment for me. But there are rumors that U.S. Cellular may be selling itself to potentially partially to T-Mobile and possibly Verizon as well.
Yeah, so this was a Wall Street Journal article that everybody else started sharing.
Hmm.
But basically, it's that T-Mobile is looking to buy a chunk of U.S. Cellular, and that Verizon is potentially looking to buy the rest of it. Uh,
Hmm.
U.S. Cellular is definitely not a big carrier. Um, they are, a very distant fourth, I believe. They might not
Right.
even be fourth anymore because of Comcast
Yeah.
and Charter, but they only have like 4 million subscribers in 21 states. And
Mostly a rural
yeah,
footprint as well,
and
which is interesting. Is T-Mobile,
yeah,
are they going to snap up that rural footprint?
I think they are. I think that's why they're trying to buy them.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have 4,000 towers um, that weren't part of the latest sale talks. So, um, this could be actually a fairly cheap buy for T-Mobile and Verizon. And I think
Hmm.
part of the reason why it's a split deal is because um, they're trying to find a way to get this deal to go through without having regulators shoot it down. And
Right.
by all of the assets not going to one carrier, I think the idea is that they would, be more
Wouldn't be as anti-competitive for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the truth
Yeah.
is, like, having a carrier that only has 4 million customers, it's not really competitive either. So
Yeah.
that's why I think the Sprint deal was a good one for the industry. I think it's a
Hmm.
net positive if you look at the state of the 5G today in the US. I think T-Mobile's acquisition of Sprint moved the industry forward. So
Yeah.
um, I think we're definitely in a position where things will improve, and hopefully that this acquisition will go through, and that maybe another player enters the scene and potentially uh, offers a better deal or has a better plan. But I think we
Hmm.
all knew that U.S. Cellular was going to be up for sale sometime soon.
I think actually you and I may have, kind of theorized, that very point, a year ago or so. But it just seems to me that US Cellular just, they were sort of dog paddling and they couldn't, kind of get over the hump, to be able to, invest what they needed to invest to, improve service and coverage for their current customer base. And, I would recall just when I would share, my insights on US Cellular on social, I would usually get a lot of replies back around, yeah, I'm a subscriber. It's been terrible forever and blah, blah, blah. They're not making the investments. And it's probably, it's just been a financial hurdle for them. And they're just not big enough to be able to scale up and, spend, what's needed to put the proper investment of infrastructure into their network. So, this will be interesting, something that we'll definitely monitor, and it will be interesting. I do believe that if both T-Mobile and Verizon are involved in, kind of splitting up US Cellular, then I think that fares a lot better with regulators than if it were just to be T-Mobile or just to be Verizon. So, but yeah, I mean, it got me thinking as well. It's like, okay, US Cellular, they have a rural footprint. T-Mobile has been very focused on rural and investing in rural. I mean, you could argue that AT&T has been as well with what they're doing with the billions of dollars that AT&T is investing in digital divide. But this is interesting. So we'll have to definitely keep monitoring this situation. But hey, man, before we wrap up, I just got to share a funny anecdote with you. So like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I'm in San Francisco. I'm actually here for the RSA conference. It's considered the largest industry cybersecurity conference. Black Hat's pretty big, but not quite as big. So I've been here all week because security is my other coverage area. And as I left the hotel today, I'm in Nob Hill. I noticed that the San Francisco Police Department, they were setting up barricades, and it was causing some confusion with rideshare. But I got to the Moscone, and I spent about half the day there. And when I came back, it was there were barricades everywhere, and there were police officers everywhere. In fact, I had to get dropped off about a block away from the Fairmont Hotel. And as I'm walking up, I see Secret Service people. They're wearing the vest with U.S. Secret Service on the back. And I walked up and said, "Hey, I don't know if you can answer my question, but what's going on?" And they told me there's an important dignitary coming to town. And I go, "Would that be the POTUS?" And the guy replied, "It's like, well, I can either confirm or deny, that." And sure enough, I got on my phone as I'm walking into the hotel, and yeah, President Biden is flying in tonight. And it should make for a very interesting ride to the airport tomorrow for me, if the 101 is barricaded for the presidential motorcade. So I hope I get home, but I just thought I'd share that with you. And then, I'm off, later in the month to Dell Tech World, but you and I will be there. We plan to do a podcast there as well. But where else are you headed after Dell?
I'm headed to Austin for ARM, so
Awesome. I won't be there. I
I'll
mean,
be in
it's
your
my
hometown.
hometown. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, that's what we do as analysts, man. Yeah, I think that we kind of gauge our performance based on the amount of airline travel that we log in. But hey, it's been a great podcast. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights for a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will's at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Saad. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune again next week. And don't forget to rate us and subscribe.